Hey, I'm Mark Mancina, and we're here to talk about my career, whatever that is, and the past and the present, and movies and music and fun stuff.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time and for being able to sit down and chat. I really appreciate it.
Through this big storm here.
Yeah, I know.
Braved it.
That's a perfect Twister weekend. You know?
It is. In LA, weird.
Yeah. So to start, I'd love to talk, but I know we've interviewed in the past, but I'd love to kind of talk about your background and kind of what kind of set you on the path to becoming a musician, and then at what point did film music kind of enter that path and kind of put you on that tangent, I guess, going that way?
You know, it's interesting you asked that question because I was talking to my brother yesterday, and he told me that when I was a little kid, that I told him I was going to conduct an orchestra. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't remember any of that. But the other thing we talked about was that I did, fortunately for me, from the time I was born, that all I wanted to do was music. So I never had a feeling that I was going to do anything else. And I think I can't do anything else, actually. But I never thought about becoming a composer of any kind or film or any of that kind of stuff. It was just that I wanted to be in music from the time I can remember. And nothing was going to stop me. And I don't know why nothing stopped me, because I had nothing but criticism and still do. But,
yeah.
But it just didn't ever faze me to give up. So I never did.
So when was it? Were you writing just your own pieces starting out, and then when did like you go, film music, like that's what I want to do?
I don't remember the film music change over, or even if there was one. I think one of the aspects was that in high school, I was really influenced by the early '70s progressive rock bands. Yeah. That was a big thing for me. Even though I was a little bit younger, I was like a year younger for my class and this kind of stuff. I was really into that music. I bonded with it, and I learned how to play it, and I wrote that kind of music. I had that kind of band, and it wasn't that far of a cry from film music in some respects.
Right. So
when I transitioned into film music, I felt like I already knew what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm. And you had some early jobs, your first jobs, that kind of going back, and I think one of the composers that you worked with they've recently put them on their website, stuff like The Bounty Hunter, Man Killers, Codename Vengeance. Do you remember all these old really bad action movies?
So what was going on at that point? So I had a band, and I was trying to get a record deal, and I was writing songs, and I was writing songs for other artists, and I was trying to make it in that area.
Yeah.
But the studio I was working in had these. They're not even C movies. I think they're F movies.
Right.
And we would have, I think we had 3 days to score them.
Wow.
And so I would bring in, I don't know what I had at that point, a couple of synthesizers or something. I don't know. And we would basically push record on the tape machine and just start recording to picture whatever came out. Because it would be, of course, it was wall-to-wall music. That's what you do usually with bad movies. And we would have to finish it by Monday morning, so we would just write these scores. Now, some of these have been on Mystery Science Theater, which is the greatest thing for me that I actually got made fun of on that channel, because that was very funny.
Right.
I think one of the movies I did, the guy said, "Ooh, I have a DX7. Listen to me go," you know. So, and that's probably what I had.
Because it was with Tim James and Steve McClintock.
Right. And they owned the studio.
Yeah.
See, they owned the studio there, so they would get the gig. And then we'd sit in this room, and I'd have the keyboard, and he'd be like, "Mark, come up with something."
That's so funny. So when did Mr. Hans come into play? When did you meet Hans, and how did that kind of collaboration?
Yeah, it's weird building? Because I was, as I say, I was writing songs and trying to get a record deal, and I was working with John Van Tongeren.
Yeah.
He was producing me as an artist, and at a certain point, we were going to mix my songs, and Jay Rifkin came in to mix the songs. And heard my songs and heard my stuff and said, have you ever written instrumental music or any kind? And I said, yeah, I've got some stuff. And he said, because I work with Hans Zimmer, and I'm just, who's that, you know? So I gave Jay the music, and Hans heard it, called me. I went to his studio. I think Billy Idol was there. And I think Days of Thunder was going on. That's how I recall it. I'm not sure that's quite right, but I think that's how. And Hans put me to work, and now I'm packing my stuff in my mom's car, basically, and driving to Santa Monica and working on these, whatever I was working on, songs and films, and working with Trevor Horn, and it was a shift. Now, at the same time as that was going on, I was also, because of my songwriting, I had songs with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Yes, and I was going to work with them, and I toured with Trevor. So all this weird, all these things were kind of converging. The prog rock thing was converging. Film music was happening.
Yeah,
it was kind of a strange time.
Someone else that you also met very early and that's been instrumental in your collaboration in your music is Dave Metzger, who who has been your orchestrator and kind of. And so talk about, as a composer, when you try to find someone that you really click with, like what makes you and Dave work so well together. And
well, really, Dave worked with me. I think it was Speed 2. I think he did some orchestration on it, but I don't remember him at that point. Mm-hmm. But when I was doing The Lion King on Broadway, we got into a disastrous situation, and I needed an orchestrator badly, and I didn't know who to get. I had people that I was working with, but I wasn't sure that was going to work out. Mm-hmm. So I think I called Don Harper, who was a good friend and composer, and I said, I need somebody who's solid and amazing, and this is going to be pressure because we're really behind. And he said Dave. So I brought Dave to, I think it was Minneapolis. And he slaved through The Lion King and, of course, did an unbelievable job. Yeah, and we never stopped working together from that point.
That's awesome. Rewinding back a little bit, one of your first big features was Speed, working with Jan de Bont. And to me, looking back at that, I'm a product. I'm born 1987. I grew up through the 90s with those action scores. That's what got me into. I'm not a composer, but what got me into film were Speed and I think Speed and Terminator 2 for me were kind of those iconic scores. You and Brad kind of set the tone for the rest of the decade. Going back, what do you remember about starting that film and what the approach for Speed needed to be?
It was great. Speed was such a weird film because Michael Kamen was hired to do Speed, and in fact was, I think, doing it, but I was hired by the director, by Jan. Mm-hmm. He wanted me to do it because I had done some music on True Romance.
Yeah.
And they had temped some of the score with the stuff I did. So somehow Jan came to me and said, I want you to do my movie. And of course, Fox, the studio, was calling me saying, you're not doing the movie. You're a nobody and, forget it. Don't even think you're doing it. Then Jan would come to me and say, don't speak to anybody. Just do it.
Wow.
Really weird.
Yeah.
So I'm working in this little room. And, my concept back then was to take all the orchestra percussion and do bus sounds, metallic sounds, all this kind of interesting texture to add to the orchestra. And then also I wanted to involve Alan Holdsworth because, again, progressive rock. Alan Holdsworth is this amazing guitar player who played with UK, which was a progressive rock band. And I asked Alan to do a bunch of textures for me. So I sort of had this great little arsenal.
Yeah.
And then I came up with, I think, a pretty good theme, and I was away, and I just put my head down, and it was a small movie, it was a small picture, and Sandra Bullock was completely unknown. I think Keanu Reeves had done Bill and Ted's, I think.
Yeah, it was Point Break before that.
Point Break, yeah. So people knew him, but it was a really, really small movie. I had no idea of the impact that movie would have.
And when you come up with a theme like that, which is now... And everyone, I remember they spoofed it in like Spy Hard. They did. It's like, what, is that the first thing you come up with? Is that like, let me get a theme first, or do you kind of try to find?
I wrote the elevator scene where they're in the elevator.
Yeah.
I wrote that scene first, and they hated it. Fox hated it. Mm-hmm. Jan liked it a lot, but after that, I thought, this movie needs a theme, and I don't remember. I wrote it early, and I showed it to him. I just don't remember. I remember it was a struggle, but I know he really liked it. Yeah. I remember when I played it for him on the main title, I played him the theme, and he would stop and laugh, and I said, "Why are you laughing?" He goes, "I love it so much, I can't contain my emotion." Yeah. But it was weird because he was laughing, so I thought, "Do you hate it? Are you making fun of it, or what?" Hey, there's somebody at the door.
You can do a pause.
Pray tell.
So we were talking about working with Jan, and you did Speed, and then you went on to do Twister, and then Speed 2 with him.
Speed 2 was really difficult because the movie had such problems. Yeah. But Twister was really fun. And I have nothing but great things to say about Jan. He took a chance on me on Speed.
Yeah.
And I loved working with him. I had hoped that he would do movies for 40 years,
Yeah.
And it just didn't really work out that way, but He's great.
So looking back at Twister, which is another kind of this iconic kind of disaster '90s movie with Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt, and great characters. How did you approach scoring? Because it wasn't like Speed where you had this big bad guy and it wasn't like a terrorist or anything, but it was just kind of, there was destruction and everything. Where did the themes come from for that film?
So they flew me out there, which was this is early on. So they flew me out to Kansas, Nebraska. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where they were. They were somewhere in the middle of the United States. Yeah. And I remember getting to the set, and there was this truck driving with Jan under the truck, holding a camera with these harnesses on him, and gigantic wind machines, and blowing stuff across the road. And I just sat there and went, "This is unbelievable. This guy's crazy." Then we went to this house that night and watched dailies, and that gave me the instinct to write that main theme, which is the Wheatfields theme, which was sort of what the whole score is based on.
Right.
Jan really wanted choir to be the voice of the Tornadoes.
Oh yeah, that's kind of,
which is kind of tricky because that can borderline on really cornball. So
yeah.
I tried my best, but I really liked that Wheatfields theme, that kind of Copeland-y. I say Copeland?
When I drove cross country, me and my friend would play that when we hit the big wind turbines like on Route 70. So.
Yeah.
Another iconic kind of '90s action film you did, of course, with Bad Boys with Michael Bay, and that was, I believe, his first film.
I think it was.
Yeah, and that was, I think, a little bit different than Speed in terms of approach. Was it just like another thing in the action canon, or how did you approach it?
No, actually, no. The thing about Bad Boys 1 that was fun for me was that it took place in I think Miami or Florida. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a Jamaican background.
Yeah.
Which made it fun to grab from that, and then sort of the action thing, and have a groove to it, and it's two cops. So I wanted to give them kind of a theme,
right.
a thing that they'd be cruising around listening to.
You didn't return for Bad Boys 2, I know, because...
I did.
You did. You worked on it for a little bit. Did you willingly walk away from it? Because I know there were some disagreements, or were you fired off of it?
Well, I should have been fired off. That would have been much better for me. No, it was, again, I just didn't want to rewrite. I just didn't want to write the same thing over and over.
Yeah, and I know that's why
I wanted to do something else with it.
That, right?
They didn't want anything else, So I think I involved Trevor. I think I did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just best if you just take it over.
Yeah.
It just wasn't working out. Michael Bay didn't like what I was doing.
Yeah. Did you ever watch the final product?
I've seen parts of it.
Because I think they
kept some of my.
They kept some of your
it's
stuff.
It's weird because it's like, who knows, man.
In terms of that kind of decade, and then I guess now, has action films, have they changed in your perspective? Like, has the way they're scored or the way they're shot? Do you think action?
Well, the themes are gone.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
Themes are gone. Yeah, which is a shame. And I have to be honest. I mean, I didn't set out to be an action composer.
I know
it was not my forte. I didn't think, and I also didn't think that's not the kind of movies I want to watch.
Yeah.
So usually,
right.
So it just happened that I had some success with it, but I wasn't always looking for the next action. And still, I'm just. It's not, always what I want to do. If it's a good film, I want to do it. Of course.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what that genre is. But just action because it's exciting and it has a fast pace and there's a pulse. Let somebody else do that.
Yeah, I mean, and another one. Another film I grew up that I really liked was Con Air, and you worked with Trevor on that one. And
that's the one. Okay, Con Air was the handoff one because I got Con Air, and I started Con Air and brought Trevor into that, and then I had to do another film, and Trevor finished it, and that sort of started his career because he was doing Steven Seagal films.
Yeah.
Before that, but
like Exit Wounds and stuff.
Yeah, but that sort of started his relationship with Jerry off. I think that's how it worked. He didn't. Yeah, and then Bad Boys 2 was later, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So. Con Air had we were talking a little bit about kind of the industrial metallic thing, and
Trevor and I did that theme for the trailer, but then that became sort of the theme.
Yeah,
we did that together, and that was really fun. That was a good time.
Yeah, and then you got his anthem guitar stuff. That's awesome.
Nobody can do it like he can.
But mentioning, we talked about Jerry Bruckheimer, and I've talked to other composers, and you said about kind of like the trust and everything. But is on a Jerry Bruckheimer production, is he the one that you answer to versus
Yeah.
the director?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind
And
of.
the thing is that, you know what, he's a really, really good guy.
Yeah.
He's not a bad guy at
No.
all. I like Jerry Bruckheimer.
Yeah.
The problem is that I just think his tendency is to feel that composers are lazy, and that if he doesn't push you hard enough, you're not going to do your best.
Okay.
I think that's his tendency with music. I don't know how he works with other people. And I always did my best for him. So it was always difficult for me to play him something and have him just walk out and go, that's not good. And I go, wait, it's really good, you know?
Yeah.
It was hard to deal with that, because what he was doing was just trying to push me.
Right.
I don't really work well that way.
Yeah.
You know, I sit down and I work my butt off to get you that theme. So
Right.
it's not like I didn't try, and it's just something I threw down.
One of the you worked with Hans kind of a little bit, rewinding a little bit. You worked with Hans on The Lion King, and then you kind of took over and did a big part for the Lion King on Broadway.
Yeah.
What was in translating such a successful film with someone, you know, Hans's work and turning into a Broadway production? And what was involved with that? I mean,
that
must have been a monumental task.
The hardest part of it, well, one of the hardest parts about it was I had just done Twister. So I had a really good career going.
Yeah.
And I knew in order to do a Broadway show, I was going to basically have to give up the movie thing for a while. And because theater is a completely different beast.
Yeah.
So I took the chance. Luckily, it was a big success.
Yeah, it's still going.
And a payoff
Yeah.
for me, which was great. But then the other part of this was that I wasn't just in charge of the score. They wanted me to interpret and write the score, because it wasn't the same score. It had some of the same themes, for sure.
Yeah.
Co-write songs and co-write lyrics. So that means every piece of music is touched.
Wow.
In the film, there were 5 songs. In the musical, there's 17, I believe.
Wow.
So it was a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it was all live, of course, because you're dealing with a pit group and you're dealing with
Yeah.
live musicians, which is, you know, quite different than working with film. Because all the timings change every night.
I mean, now that it's been running for, I don't know how many years now.
20. This is our 20-year anniversary.
20 year. Does it need retooling? Does it need? Do you touch it again?
You know,
or is it
I
let
just
it
came
go?
back from doing that.
Really?
I actually
Wow.
put myself, me, Dave Metzger, who did the orchestration, and Julie Taymor,
Yeah.
Lebo, and Garth Fagan, who was the choreographer, put us in the theater with the cast, and we went through the show, and Tom Schumacher, who's in charge, said to us, I want you to change whatever you want to change, tweak whatever you want to tweak, because this is 20 years later, we're all 20 years older, in another 20 years, they might be wheeling us down here. So this is your last chance, basically. It was very surreal to be in there and saying, let's take that violin out, and let's take the percussion boxes out of that cue.
Was it just changing things for the sake of changing things, or was it?
It was just a chance for the original creative team to tweak it a little bit if needed, and some stuff wasn't needed, of course, you know.
That's
But
interesting.
it was surreal.
So
it was
kind of revisit that world and be in that world again.
very strange.
Yeah. And speaking of Disney, I mean, you have such a great relationship with Disney, with Tarzan and Brother Bear and Plans, and recently Moana.
Yeah.
And I just interviewed Henry Jackman just 2 weeks ago, and we talked about his Disney films. And do you feel like there is a Disney, like when you say Disney movie, you immediately think of, I guess, a type of film or type of sound? Do you think there is a kind of a brand that you fill in as a composer that you work within, kind of like, okay, I'm going to make a Disney score? Or do you be like, I'm just approaching this as
I don't have any kind of Disney formula.
Yeah, there's
for
not,
sure.
okay.
But I can tell you that the scrutiny and on Planes and Moana, that's John Lasseter.
Yeah.
So your themes need to hit him in a
Right.
place where he says that's great,
Right.
and that's not too easy to do.
Yeah, is he picky with?
It's not that he's picky; it's that he goes with his gut, and he's right.
Yeah, he's a very smart guy.
He seems to be very smart. So you want to do your best for him. You want to do your best, but it's also nerve-wracking because if he doesn't like it, it's gone. I mean, it's not. Let's talk about it. It's just not doing it for me. I don't like that color of that car. You can't make me like it.
Yeah.
And I respect that. But I'd say for the most part, he likes what I do. So
yeah. And for Moana, I mean, it was you got to collaborate. You work on the songs and the score.
Yeah, everything.
And which is like looking back at Frozen, which is a big successful film, but Christoph didn't work on the songs.
Yeah, it was two different camps
things.
So
in
a way.
And you're coming from working on both. Do you see a benefit to? I see it as stitching the fabric a little bit better. I don't know. Do you prefer not like? Do you like working on the songs and the score? Or do you prefer to be? I'd rather just do this.
Well, you're asking me at a bad time because when I finished that movie, that was way too much to take on. To be the producer on the songs, to help write songs, to write the score.
Right.
And the way that I work, it was that movie, as far as the responsibility aspect of it, was me, Dave Metzger, and Marlon.
Mm-hmm.
We did it. Now, Lin did great and wrote great stuff. Opataya did great and wrote great stuff. But they can't write a score, and they can't fit the songs together and make the songs work and extend the bridge and make sure that it addresses what's going on in the story.
Right.
And, that's a whole different skill set. And I don't work with a big team or even 4 people. It's just us. So for just us, it was a big chunk to do to be responsible for the entire thing.
Right. Was it any different than working on like Tarzan or Brother Bear with like working with Phil Collins or anything like that?
Tarzan was easier.
Mm-hmm.
For one thing, Phil was really attentive because he's a workaholic basically.
Yeah.
So he was fantastic. The songs were written ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So in Moana, we wrote the songs as we were doing the score. We were writing the songs 4 months before the movie was done.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because also the score had to be written.
Yeah.
So that aspect was difficult. Geographically, it was very difficult. Lin is in New York and the most successful guy in the universe.
Right.
Opataya is in New Zealand. To get us together was not easy.
With the time zone,
Everything about it was difficult. There was just a lot of humps and difficulties involved in making that film. Tarzan, the songs were written. I came into it and took the songs and arranged and produced them for the film, but they were already kind of there.
Yeah.
And then wrote the score, and then Phil played on the score. So the whole thing was just like a dream. It was a lot of work, but it was great. Moana was much more kind of. They really wrote the story as they went, so they didn't have the story ahead of time. So even 7 months out, they weren't really sure how this was going to end and how the story was going to be.
Wow.
So it made it
stressful
and hands-on. The hours spent were tremendous, and I'm sure for the writers and everybody that worked on that film.
Well, as just from my point of view, I think it paid off because it's one of my favorite scores of the year and everything. I think the whole experience, I was in tears. Like
I loved the film, but I have to tell you that like a month before we were done, I was just thinking, this is never going to pull together. This is going to be a mess, and it's going to be ridiculed as a big Disney mess. I just didn't have the confidence anymore. And it was overworked too, but they really pulled it together. We kept working on the music, and we kept reworking it and remixing it or whatever had to be done, re-recording flute ideas and things with it. And then all of a sudden, I saw it about 3 days before they sent the answer prints out, and it was pretty stunning.
Yeah.
And beautiful.
It's beautifully
the animation
animated.
is just,
oh my God.
Yes.
So vivid.
Well, those directors are...
Oh, yeah. John and
John and Ron.
Yeah, they're amazing. Little Mermaid, Aladdin, yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of a different... We're talking about animation. You did these 2 really great things. Blood Plus... these 2 amazing albums that came out with that, and what was it like working on a piece of anime like that? And kind of, it was a very modern, Western sounding score, kind of in a different style of animation.
Yeah, really different.
Yeah.
Okay, so that movie was done unlike anything I've ever done. I think part of it was because it's Japanese.
Yeah.
And this, I did this with Don Harper and Dave Metzger. So the 3 of us basically had to take on this beast because it was a lot of music.
Yeah.
What they did was they wrote story beats, and then they would give us a style of music, and then we would write that piece.
Wow.
And then go to the next one. There must have been, I don't know, 100 of them? I don't know. But basically, we wrote all the music without any picture at all.
Right.
So, and that's never really done that I can think of. It was fun to do it that way.
Yeah.
And then the editors we would record it in all different ways so that there were tons of options.
So then they pretty much kind of scored it, I guess, the picture.
They pieced it together.
Wow.
And there's a lot, people do films that way, and there's some composers that have had great success doing it that way. But that's not normally the way I work.
Yeah. I think, looking back at like Leone or Malick, they'd like to put to music, beforehand. So it's definitely different.
Yeah.
It can come that way from that way too.
Yeah.
And all these scores that we're talking about, I think your sound is so versatile because you capture so many different cultures and sounds and ethnicities and into your music. Do you have to do a lot of research, like when you're doing Moana, looking at that culture, or doing something? Or is there a lot of research involved on your instrumentation and styles and everything?
And the great thing about working with Disney is that they help with all of that because they understand that I need to immerse myself in the culture. So they actually sent me to New Zealand during a festival where a lot of different islands that are down there, there's thousands of islands down there, but let's say some of them, brought their traditional music over and performed on all these different stages.
Wow.
So we went over there, Lynn and me, and Opatai was already there.
Yeah.
And I was able to hear and watch and take pictures of the instruments and see what they're playing and see what the vocals sound like and what they're doing before we started. So that was invaluable.
Wow.
Besides just giving me stacks of music to listen to, of traditional and ancient music from all the different areas down there.
Do certain different cultures influence the type of theme that you can write with the instruments that you have at your repertoire?
Well, one of the things we wanted to stay away from was making a documentary. Right. That wasn't the idea. So, of course, thematically, I went to themes that I felt comfortable writing and that I thought would work well for the film. I wasn't trying to think, well, you can only use 3 notes, so you got to use these 3. Because really, the music, Polynesian, South Pacific music, is really rhythmic and vocal. It's much more that than it is a certain instrument or a certain theme that they always do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So kind of jumping out of the world of animation, another film you did that I really loved was August Rush, and I thought it was such a unique opportunity for you as a composer because you got to kind of create music that was both in the diegetic and non-diegetic world, and because the main character, of course, was this kind of musical prodigy. What was it like? I guess you're almost not just scoring the character, but scoring for the character as well, right? Yeah. So
scoring as the character.
As the character.
I loved that movie. I loved doing that.
Yeah.
Just from my experience in doing music and actually, again, I have to go back to progressive rock.
Yeah.
There were these albums that came out in 1972 and I think I was a sophomore, freshman, I don't know what I was. Whatever I was. Yeah. There were these records, Thick as a Brick, Close to the Edge, Selling England by the Pound, Foxtrot, I think was the one in 72 by Genesis. These records were so amazing, and the music was like a 20-minute piece. And at the end of the piece, usually it had a recapitulation of all the themes that you had heard, especially Close to the Edge.
Right.
When I got the job to do August Rush, I told them right off the bat, the first thing I'm writing is the symphony at the end.
Yeah.
Whatever that piece is going to define everything that happens before. So they kind of went, well, maybe that makes sense. So what I did was I took the script and I had a scroll and I wrote this piece of music and then we played it with the scroll. So as the script was going, you were hearing what should be happening when you were at a certain place in the script.
Wow.
Now, the original one was, I think, like 8 minutes long. It was a pretty big piece of music.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the producers cut it down, and but still, it was still a good piece of music.
Oh yeah.
They cut it down,
Yeah.
and I'll never forget when we finished the movie. A couple of weeks later, the producer Richard Lewis called me and said, I'm out at the pool and I'm listening to your original demo, and I think it was better than the. It's that feeling of, that's what I was trying to say. But
it was you got it on the soundtrack release. I think it was on there, yeah. That was awesome.
And Dave Metzger helped me a lot on that film.
Yeah.
And we went to New York and watched them film that last scene, which was really exciting because the actors got a chance to talk with me, and they loved that piece of music. They'd been hearing that piece of music for the whole time they were shooting.
Right. And
so they loved it. Yeah. And so then we kind of met up, and it was really fun. It was fun for me.
That's awesome. So outside of films, you work in television as well, and Criminal Minds, and is writing for television. I know a lot of people say that the schedules are crazy and everything. Yeah. Do you find it more creatively, I guess, stimulating to be under a tighter deadline, or do you like room to breathe?
I like that room to breathe thing.
So you'd rather have more time.
What I noticed in television, is usually the people are younger that are in charge.
Showrunners and stuff.
I mean, when you're younger, you know, you usually want to prove yourself, so you tend to be a little more aggressive. And having worked with directors like Jan and John and Ron, you know, they're my age, but they're a little bit older than I am.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable, you know.
Right.
Whereas when you're working with somebody who's 25, you know, on their first TV series, it's a little difficult because they're not looking at me with amazing respect for what I've done. They're just looking at their own career and thinking this better be good, you know. So it's a little tough.
Well, one director we forgot to talk about was Antoine Fuqua. Who, he did an amazing job with Training Day.
Antoine.
And you know, he's still making movies. And you guys had a really good thing going on. I always am interested, you know, certain directors and composers will kind of work for periods and then kind of go parting ways. That's
always the director's decision.
It's always the director's decision?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the composer will be latching on as long as
I love when people tell me, oh, yeah, well, I turned that down. And I always think, you know, if it's a good film, I don't think he turned it down.
Yeah.
Antoine is, you know, he's a little finicky, you know, and I loved working with him. We started with Bait.
Right, yeah.
And which was a blast. And then as we were finishing Bait, he goes, here's our next film. And it was Training Day. And then we did that, and that won an Oscar.
Yeah.
And then he was gone. You know,
that's...
and then I tracked him down years later, and I just saw him, I think, in a restaurant. We met, and I said, what happened? I mean, did I piss you off, or what's the, you know, what... I thought we were doing some great work. And he's like, no, we should have never parted. Let's do Shooter, you know. So then we did Shooter, and then I didn't hear from him, and then we did a little TV thing, and that was that. So I haven't talked to him since. So I don't know.
It's interesting. I always, because I know there's the directors, you know, everyone comes to mind, John Williams and Steven Spielberg, you know.
Yeah, and you know, Spielberg won't do a movie without John, and if it's a jazz score or if it's a thematic score or if it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's John Williams.
Yeah.
I never had that loyalty, you know. Yeah. Al has that with Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's wonderful. I applaud that. I just didn't have that.
Yeah, I love seeing that because you get to see the composer and the director kind of go through the different motions throughout their careers.
It's so important, and I just would think for a director it would be so. I think it would be comforting to know that your composer can help pull it out, as Alan does. And you know, I thought Antoine and I were doing that, but things changed.
So last time we spoke, I mean, you told me that you were kind of becoming a little bit more selective on what you pick. Kind of at this point in your career, you're kind of selective about the projects.
I'm not even becoming selective. I've always been selective. You know, it's just not for me. It's just not. I got to get that next film.
Right.
I've never felt that way.
So there's never a rush to jump to the next project.
Never.
Do you turn away projects that come to your doorstep that you don't feel passionate about?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, that's also a matter of timing.
Right.
You know, it's not always the film. It can be timing, or it can be the people. You know, I've gone down for meetings and sat in waiting to meet with the producers or whoever for like an hour and just thought, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
You know, if this is their meeting with me and I'm just sitting around, what's it going to be like when I want to try to play music for them?
Right, and then it's a lot of time from your life too, because you know these.
But I'm saying that as being fortunate to have had successes.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know, I mean, if you're coming up, you can't afford to do that. But I think once I did The Lion King on Broadway, I felt a little bit like, okay, I'd really like to do. And that's why August Rush was so great. I really would like to do some other films that show my other talents rather than this guy's running down the street and somebody's chasing him.
Yeah, and doing the same old stuff. But I mean, and then, are there anything kind of at this point in your career? Is there anything left on the so-called kind of career bucket list? Like, is there stuff that you still, and maybe not even musically related? Is there anything that you kind of say to yourself personally, like, I want to do this, I haven't touched this yet?
You know, John Lasseter was my bucket list guy.
Yeah.
I don't even know how, you know, it was Chris Montana that put us together. Mm. Chris called me and said, John needs a theme for this movie called Planes, and I want to give you a shot. And if he loves it, you'll work with him and do a bunch of films with him. If he doesn't like it, you'll never talk to him again. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go through this.
God.
I don't want to have this kind of pressure. But, you know, it's John. It was a chance to work with him. And man, I tell you, working with him was just incredible.
And I remember that. It was such a big deal because that first teaser was 100% score.
Yeah.
It was just nothing, just your music.
I know.
And
he
I've
loved
never
it.
seen
He
that.
loved it, and he told me that. He said to me that that's his theme, and he just wanted to show that theme as it stood. I mean, that for me
good.
was it did, tremendous.
Yeah.
It was like a little bit of payback to me for him because he's brought so many great films into the world. I mean,
when you approach, I mean, this is going to be just kind of for any project. I'm sure it's going to be different for every project, but what's usually kind of the starting point for you? I know I like to ask kind of the same question to live composers. Like, where does the first note come from? Is it from a conversation? Is it a thought? Is it looking at the image? Like, where does it usually come from for you?
Well, I have to meet with the director. Mm-hmm. I have to get a sense of what he or she's looking for.
Right.
So that's first. Then I think it's the color palette. Like doing a painting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want your normal palette that has all like 100 colors, or do you want to just limit it to maybe 6?
Right.
And then just work with those colors and see. And I think that's normally what we do is start working with the palette and trying to figure out what kind of, is it orchestral, is it textural,
right.
What is it, or is it a combination?
Yeah.
And then once the sounds are kind of figured out, then you just start writing. And usually it's garbage at first. But
is it is it a trial and error for you? Do you ever hit it on the first shot, like first time, like I nailed it? Like,
I don't think I do.
No. Do you need some?
Once I get going, but it's the initial, like starting the first cue and trying to, or figure out what the sound of the film is. That takes some trial and error.
Do you need someone to tell you when you've hit it? Like, do you need a director to be like, you got it there, Mark, or do you know in your head, like, I found it?
That's a difficult one. I go by what I think is best. Mm-hmm. So when I hit something that I really like, the problem is that I believe in it.
Yeah.
So if they don't, then I start to doubt that they know what they're doing. Usually, if I really feel it, they feel it.
Yeah.
So I'd say 80% of the time, it's a done deal once I get it.
Oh, that's good.
But that other 20% is the time where I think I've written some stuff for Jerry Bruckheimer that was some of the best action stuff I've ever written, and it's
tossed out,
gone.
Do you keep that in the back?
Nah,
it's gone forever.
Not then. That was the I think the 90s.
Yeah.
So that was just.
Did it live somewhere in a hard drive, or is it like?
No, I don't even think there was a hard drive. I'm not sure. It's probably on DAT, or something.
So when you're writing a score and you need to draw kind of on the emotion or on the emotion of a scene or the emotion of a character, do you pull from your own life experience, from all your ups and downs, all the pains or joys, or is it more of just like, is it autobiographical or is it interpretive? Like, do you I know how to tell this story, or do you I felt this before and kind of pull from your own self?
It's probably both. I think the difficult one is if you don't feel it from the scene.
Right.
And then you need to write it. That's difficult.
Right.
But if it's something where let's say it's a woman and an abortion, well, I have no idea what that feels like, so I can't say that's my experience, but I can try to feel that.
Right.
But when you have a scene where you're just not feeling that chemistry that you're supposed to be feeling, and you need to make it work. Right. That's trickier. That's harder. Yeah. It's harder to write a bad film. Yeah. It really is.
But in terms of, but everyone is doing. I don't think anyone sets out to make a bad film.
No. No, of course not. But there comes that time
when you realize
when the scenes are just,
Yeah, for sure. I do want to touch a little bit. You scored very briefly. You worked on some video games, or 2 video games, Sorcery, and then you did Modern Warfare. I saw your name pop up. That was interesting. You helped out with Lauren and Hans.
No, I think they took some themes. I don't remember that. I think they took some themes that already existed, and so they put my name on it. Because I don't think I sat down and wrote that.
Because you were just listed as an additional composer, so maybe they... I
think they took some stuff.
So that's interesting.
I don't remember that.
But for Sorcery, how did that come onto your doorstep?
So that was fun. I mean, that was a Sony project. I've never done a video game, and I thought, well, this, it's themes. It was a little bit more like Blood Plus, where they gave me scenarios, and I just wrote music for it. And that's really fun. That's like getting an assignment every day. Can you write a piece about somebody walking on the beach, or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And then you do it, and then you turn it in, and then so and this was Irish, this was Celtic, which I love, so that made it really fun.
Yeah,
too.
you did that with Moll Flanders.
Yeah,
so you got to touch in that area.
Yeah, and Moll Flanders was really fun for me.
Yeah,
so.
I love that score. It's great.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah.
I just wish I would have had a budget. You know.
Well, when you don't have a budget,
then you pay violinists to come in and you give them booze and you get them to record it. I mean, that's what I did on that film. If you listen to the fiddle playing is great. You know.
Yeah.
I don't remember who that was, but it was a guy that was in the studio down in Santa Monica and playing on something, and I asked him if he would play on it, and he said, if you give me get some wine going and stuff. So I had all these bottles open. I just kept giving. He was playing it off of the notation on my sequencer and playing the parts. So it was. This is back when I think we could only record one track at a time in audio. So it was.
Wow.
A while ago.
Yeah. So a lot of your scores, I mean, are getting a lot of expanded releases. They're getting remastered and revisited. And you're gonna sit down with Jan tomorrow for Twister kind of signing with the new La La Land release.
Is Jan there tomorrow?
I believe so. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I didn't tell you this.
No.
they got Jan. So.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, how great.
All the expanded releases, when you getting to revisit your scores now, from all these years ago, when you have to approve all these things and looking them over again, do you look back with fondness, or do you go, oh man, what was I thinking then? Like,
well, I did on Twister.
Yeah.
And something else that we did, I don't remember what it was.
What else was recent? I think they did like Money Train.
Oh, Haunted Mansion. That just came out.
That was on Uncharted.
That, and the movie, didn't do that great.
Right.
It wasn't that great,
Yeah.
but for me the music was strong and really exciting.
Yeah.
And Rob Minkoff, the director, really supported it. So we had a choir and harpsichords, pipe organs, full orchestra. Did it at Sony. It was really exciting.
So looking kind of at the industry as a whole, are there any trends or practices that are going on today that you are you can say like, oh, I'm really glad I'm seeing this right now, or are there any things that you're going, I'm just kind of unfortunate, I wish this wasn't going on, like, or that's too bad, I wish it was,
I think the tragedy is the lack of use of real people playing on the scores.
So just synthetic,
and that's
scores.
Budgets and
time
and all these different things.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate because there's just nothing like 90 people playing together. You can't replace that with anything. And I think at times I really miss that. But when I hear it, it's really refreshing. It makes me feel good about it. So
I think it's because there's a lot of live. I think there's a lot of more than I've seen before, live performances and scores to pictures, and and they're performing Back to the Future live to picture and E.T. live to picture. I think I feel like it's a surge. I think it's a little bit of a surge in pop culture.
And Dave Newman does that,
and
people flip out because they kind of go, "Wow, that's what music does." That it's always a surprise. The other thing is that you can write a score for for synthetic orchestral sound.
Yeah.
You can write it a certain way, and it's difficult to tell the difference.
Yeah.
But if you write an orchestral score, a proper orchestral score, you can't. The difference is unbelievable between human beings and machines. So, I try to stay on that side of things.
And to wrap up, I would love to just, if you were asked to come back for Bad Boys 3, would you say yes? If Michael and Jerry showed up on your doorstep and said, "Hey, come on back."
First of all, I think that would never happen in a million years.
What about Speed 3? If Speed 3 happens.
If Jan did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
As long as it wasn't on a boat, I'd be okay.
That's funny because I think that I was looking back at why Keanu Reeves turned it down, and he goes, "It's on a boat."
Right,
guys.
If it's on a spaceship, that's not going to work either. So, no more space movies.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No problem.